The Hawai'i Sports Radio Network on 95.1 FM and AM 760 presents Wake Up in the Den with Ku'ule Agbayani.
Good morning, beautiful people. It's Wake Up in the Den, Ku'ule Agbayani and Paul Brecht. Happy long weekend. Hello, everybody. I hope you guys enjoyed your Labor Day weekend. It felt like it was weird. It was really weird to be gone that long, as we are so used to talking to all of you beautiful people. But nonetheless, hope everyone had a good weekend. Roads are feels a bit busier these times, I guess, but it's okay. A lot to recap. We'll definitely obviously talk a lot of college football as we went through the first official week 1 in college football, and it's the NFL week. What? Can you believe NFL week 1 is actually here as well? Thankfully, we are on this, on the show every single day, because I don't know how we would be able to fit everything if we were just on once a week for an hour. So we will definitely get into a lot of NFL throughout the week. However, I do want to save it because, once again, we're lucky because you guys get us every weekday morning, so we can save it. We want to save today for college instead. But before we do get into college football, of course, yes, we're going to talk a lot about your Rainbow Warriors. But I do want to give the ladies their flowers first, as the Rainbow Wahine, they cracked the Division I women's volleyball poll, coming in at number 23 in week 2 of the poll, and they haven't been ranked in the top 25 since 2019. It doesn't even feel that long. Maybe it's because the success on the men's side, but the Rainbow Wahine always seem to be competitive, but yet. But first time since 2019. So shout out to the Rainbow Wahine volleyball team. We'll talk a little bit more about their 2-game series, which they swept against USC, coming up in the show. But I just wanted to start the show off by giving them their flowers. Not only them, Amber Igidi, she reaches 1,000 career kills during their second match against USC on Saturday. So shout out to Amber. And then, but wait, there's more. Igidi and Kate Lang repeat as Big West Offensive Player and Setter of the Week, respectively, obviously. But like I said, we'll talk more about the matches coming up a little later in the show. And there's more. Shout out to Chaminade women's volleyball. They've been off to an 8-0 start. However, in Division 2, the first poll just came out this week. So as I mentioned, Division 1 is in their second week. Division 2, this is their first week. And they are ranked 20th in the first regular season poll to come out. So shout out to the Lady Silver Swords, whoop, whoop, of Chaminade women's volleyball. There you go. Kicking butt.
Our very own alma mater for one Ku'ule Agbayani there. No, it's super exciting. Tons of good volleyball being played by the Rainbow Wahine. And like you said, the Lady Silver Swords doing a phenomenal start to the season as well, starting out 8-0. A lot of really, really good vibes for the women's athletics all over the island of Oahu to start out their I'll call it fall season, I guess. That checks out, right?
Yep. But again, I just wanted to start the show, give the ladies their flowers. We'll talk more Rainbow Wahine volleyball coming up a little later. Okay, so that brings us back to football. Gosh, Paul, where do we start with this game? Well, first, I guess I'll start off by giving you guys the score. Obviously, Hawaii loses to Stanford 37-24. Stanford closed as the 2-point favorite. This is why you just take the money line when it's that small, and then you're like, at least it won't hurt as much. You're just, we'll lick our wounds. It's okay, people. Over under 54, so the over hit. So we hit, one of two of our natural bets, Hawaii and the over. So it's okay. We'll get as they came in at the 61 total. So not too bad.
I did joke that, I don't remember with who, but I did joke after the game that I know some people were sweating out that final drive for the Rainbow Warriors. Something along the lines of, like you said, Hawaii and the over. it came down to the end. Hawaii in the late game always makes sure people end the night with a little bit of extra blood racing.
This is why, right? We talk about, and I don't want to go too down this rabbit hole, but just making a little note again that people always, just talk about, Hawaii, like, well, when there was the Pac-12, now doesn't belong, yada, yada, yada. But now that we're in kind of like this new sports betting landscape, I feel like any conference would love to have Hawaii as part of their rotation because that's more eyeballs on your conference game being played late at night. Again, the landscape has changed. It's nowhere near where we were like 5 years ago. Sports betting is a big thing. People where Paul's originally from, they're up late at night watching as they bet the most, more than Nevada.
All of them.
Those people in New York and New Jersey. So, and that's where the games are the latest. So I'm just throwing it out there that I don't see why you wouldn't want Hawaii and the late game to be part of your conference. Now that we're in this new, even if they're not that competitive, people are still going to be up watching because they'll probably be betting the other team. So.
Put us in the ACC.
Yeah,
that's where Stanford is now too, along with Cal. We're as Atlantic coast as they are. Why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
We're thinking out of the box here.
Hawaii travels what seems like the globe 706 times as it is for athletics already,
Yeah. Not too shabby. We'll get used to it. Yeah.
Everyone else will get used to it. We're already used to it.
So we're just throwing that back out there as we tend to do from time to time. All right. But starting with the good news, I guess, Pefele Ashlock is the first freshman wide receiver in program history to start a career with back-to-back 100-yard games and earn Mountain West Freshman of the Week once again. We saw some action via Koali Nishigawa, got some good playing time with 6 receptions for 52 yards. And the Maui boy, Carson Pupunu, had that big catch for 33 yards, hoping he would have gotten like the touchdown because how sweet would that have been? The home game experience they went completely Hawaiian for that entrance to come in, and then they had the pule or the prayer beforehand for the victims in Maui, and we were just in the press box too. And I was next to Kanoa Leahy, and because Kanoa, since it was a national broadcast, Kanoa essentially had the day off, not having to do the Spectrum broadcast. So we were all hanging out, and he was like, "Oh man, give it to the Maui boy! Like that would be so sweet if Carson were to score." But oh well, and actually, when you look at, again, we'll get into more of the preview of Hawaii's upcoming game against U of Albany throughout the week. However, the notes, we never got those game notes, by the way.
I noticed. Trust I noticed.
The notes for for Hawaii came out, which was also the depth chart. And, Papunu is actually listed as a starter over Chucky Hines in one of those wide receiver spots. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Good for him. Even though it was only that one catch, but I guess they see what they need to see from him in terms of just running the routes, getting open, and shout out to Carson.
Yeah, no, absolute shout out to Carson. It was really cool to see. I tweeted it out that it was one of the coolest catches I'd seen at the very least in a while, if not ever. The Hawaii football account had a good tweet talking about tip drill and whatnot. It was really, really cool to see that. Like you said, I wish he was able to get a touchdown along with it. I do think they targeted him once in the end zone, or at least he was somewhat near one time. That's when I held my breath the most. I was like, please, 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 please. But outside of that, it was cool to see him. And like you said, it's nice to see him get his hard work noticed and recognized, especially as he continues to go through a tough time personally. And in this Hawaii offense, even if you are demoted, I'll say, to second string or not that starter role, in the run and shoot, they have demonstrated tenfold through 2 weeks how they want to get the ball to so many different receivers, so many different targets, get everyone involved, and how they understand they have a ton of weapons. So if you are somebody who is second string, quote unquote, on the depth chart, you still know you're going to make your way out there and you have to be ready, prepared at all times. So it's something that I'm sure we'll see continue to move up and down throughout the season.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I feel like nowadays, especially we saw it, with Stanford and even a little bit with Vanderbilt, and it's depth charts, especially the official ones that come out for the game notes, because they're released so early, you kind of just take them with a grain of salt, and they're going to switch over all the time because they still have to go through a whole week of practice. I mean, when you look at it as well, what's his name? Meki Pay is still on there, even though he got flagged for the targeting like in the second half. So you're supposed to sit out, right? And even he's like on there at the top. But however, I do want to excuse me, not Meki Pay, Isaiah Tufunga. But we're going to get into the bad a little coming up in the next segment. Still want to stick to the good. Braden Shager, he's looking good. He actually, and that offensive line, they gave him a lot of time. Now, he did get sacked quite a few times. But however, when you were watching certain plays develop, I don't know how many times I really thought in my head, like as the game was going on, I was like, oh, wow, that was a lot of time that he had. Wow, that was a lot of time he had to throw the ball. Like, I caught myself saying that multiple times. Again, yes, you can't, sacks happen. I mean, hey, if you don't get rid of the ball fast enough, and that's something Braden has to learn too. But for the most part, I was really pleased with the amount of time that his offensive line was giving him, and he was able to throw for 30 completions, 355 yards, and 3 touchdowns. So still doing his thing in the run and shoot.
No interceptions, no fumbles as well. So no turnovers, cleaning that up after week 1. We saw a couple of critical interceptions for the Bows. So I was happy to see that. Like you said, a career high 355 yards, career high 30 completions. He performed. And he still wasn't pleased with himself after the game because, kind of like you said, he felt he could have done better by his offensive line. I thought his offensive line did a nice job as well, giving him a lot of time. I thought a lot of those 6 sacks that ended up coming for the Cardinal were more coverage sacks where, like you said, Braden couldn't really get rid of the ball. He's sitting there going through every read possible and just nowhere to go. And we did see Braden do a better job as the game progressed of throwing the ball away as well. I can't think of how many times I heard that official say, there is no flag for intentional grounding on the play. The quarterback was outside the pocket and the ball went past the line of scrimmage. And it seems like a silly little thing, but that is so smart. It's something I find myself screaming at NFL quarterbacks for my favorite team to do all of the time instead of taking sacks. And he did adjust and learn to that. So I thought another positive step forward for Braden Shager against, let's just face it, a quality opponent in Stanford. I know we talked a lot about how they're rebuilding and under a new head coach, first year under a new head coach, but we talked about Troy Taylor having a lot of success back at Sac State and how Timmy Chang talked about it as well, how difficult it was to prepare for this Stanford team who has a lot of 4-star talent on their roster as well.
So we'll give that advantage to Stanford in this one. We mentioned it last week. Who will have that advantage? Will Hawaii have that advantage considering they have one game under their belt and they'll come in more mentally prepared because they were able to work as a team for one game? Or will Stanford have the advantage because now they have tape on Hawaii and Hawaii doesn't have tape on Stanford? So give the advantage. And Troy Taylor just proved how great of a coach he is. He was very successful at Sacramento State. What is it? Only like 8 losses. So he was... and
3-time Big Sky Coach of the Year.
So he did his thing. I do have to kind of joke, though, about every time they showed Troy Taylor on TV, like... he calls, like, I don't know how young, air quote young, this man is, but like he was always like squatting when he's like looking at his playbook and he's like squatting on the ground. And I'm like, after a while, I'm like, dang, my knees are starting to get sore just watching this man squat. No, but that's how intense he was. He's just like squatting, looking at his pages, writing stuff down. I'm like, oh man, you're pretty intense. And of course,
that's how I coach too, actually. So that's funny to hear.
Yeah, but
I got the young knees.
He's probably old enough to be your dad. So
I got the young knees. He's doing it with. Though I will say I get that from my dad. So maybe it's that generation. That generation of coaches just likes to squat down or something.
But no, he was a good coach. The Gilman Ohana was out in force. They did have to be scooted though. They got used to the old times of going to Hawaii football games and heard they were starting a big gathering in the parking structure and did have to be kind of moved along. Like, you can't, because there's supposed to be no tailgating, obviously. So it kind of got moved along. But of course, the Gilmans were out in force. Even Aloha Gilman was here. I guess he flew in really quick before he has to go back for NFL training, gearing up for the start of the season. So all cheering on Aloha Gilman. So that was pretty cool. They had their own section of all the local people, and get a little smack talk. But hey, Aloha led their defense. So shout out to him
He's good, man.
Yeah, he's really good. He led their Cardinal defense with 7 tackles, and he's just that type of presence that you love having within your defense, and a veteran presence, considering this is a very new team collectively, and they lost a lot of players to the transfer portal. But yeah, he was there, so naturally he sees his family there. He's playing out of his mind. He's really, really good. So, but anyways, got to step aside. When we come back, we will start getting into the nitty gritty. The stuff that's hard to talk about, but also I want to point out an interesting fact about one of those referees that we had in the game as well. We'll be back on Wake Up in the Den.
Wake Up in the Den with Ku'ulei Agbayani on the Hawai'i Sports Radio Network, 95.1 FM and AM 760.
Welcome back to Wake Up in the Den. Ku'ulei Agbayani and Paul Brecht talking all about UH football's game against Stanford over the weekend, or I guess over Friday. All right, so we talked about some of the highlights, some of the goods. We definitely have a good team. It's coming together. We have a good coaching staff. Timmy Chang said it in the post-game press conference that, this is when it becomes a real coach's game, because because you did not have the video on Stanford to prepare for especially a new coach coming in. So you don't even have an idea of what type of scheme he's going to run, a change in rosters and starters. So they were very much just adjusting on the fly. And I think, they again, just like last game, we had a chance at the end and it just kind of didn't work out in our favor. But I think for the most part, this team, there are still high hopes for this team. And I know some people will be like, oh, great, we lost again. I still am very positive. Albany, I don't want to look over them, however. I mean, they had a pretty decent showing against Marshall, so FCS school, but hey, they kind of showed what they got as well in terms of their defense. And granted, I think probably Hawaii is a better team than Marshall, but not going into this game lightly. However, Hawaii's going to win.
I'm going to repeat it every single week. Hawaii's going to win. And until they give me reason to believe that they are incapable of winning, I will feel that they have a shot to win every single week. And I still feel that way even after this week, even with some frustration with the way they lost kind of being almost similar to week 1, where you see some undisciplined play, you see the Bows shoot themselves in the foot, and they're a good team, like you said, with good players and good coaches, but they are still working their way towards being a great team. And they're not good enough quite yet to overcome giving away free chances, free opportunities, free first downs, extra chances to other teams quite yet, especially when you're still trying to learn how to win as a young team or a rebuilding team. You're learning how to win, and so far you've seen the Bows kind of learn how they can lose. And that's how I've taken these first 2 weeks, is like you've shown you have the pieces to win, but you can't put it together for a full game quite yet. That's going to be a really big question going into this week, like you said, against a quality FCS program in Albany, who, if anybody who's updated on the NFL draft, Jared Verse at FSU, he's going to be probably the top edge rusher off the board come this upcoming draft. He started his college career at Albany, so they've shown that they can recruit some pretty good players who will end up leaving eventually. But but can recruit some pretty good players, especially on the defensive end. So once again, if Hawaii takes this team for granted, if Hawaii kind of thinks everything's sweet going into the week, then there's a chance that the Bows head into week 3, I guess. Into week 3 looking for
our week 3.
Looking for another chance at a victory that slips away.
Yeah, and going back to just their mistakes, this is via Paul Brecht's recap. Hawaii was penalized 11 times for 114 yards, 9 penalties for 81 yards for Stanford. But also a good point out that you make, Paul, is that Hawaii basically gift wrapped 6 first downs via penalty. 6 people. That's a lot to just be like, here you go. You're welcome. Here's another chance when we were about to get the ball back from you. But here you go. 6 penalties. Again, that's via Paul's recap. Be sure you go check it out. That and then his 3 takeaways at hawaiisportsradio.com and click on the Hawaii football tab. But I thought that was a big thing that stood out to me, that you essentially give them a whole other set of downs that you could have prevented, and clearly Stanford able to capitalize on those things. Another thing as well, just we got to get that run game going. I really believe that this would have been Tylen Hines a breakout, but I mean, we just like the coaches, I wasn't sure what to expect in terms of the defensive line on Stanford's side. And you know what? They weren't given any of those pukas. When you look at the final stats, I mean, it's the difference really. When you look at net yards passing, Hawaii passing better and more than Stanford at 355 yards for Hawaii and just 248 for Stanford. But the real difference offensively for each team came down to the rushing yardage. Stanford putting up 158 yards rushing to Hawaii's net -5. So not even getting positive yardage when it comes to our rushing game. So that's something that we need to figure out. So if we can get the run game going, because clearly, hey, Braden's really figuring it out. He could, I still, I just need to not think of how we've traditionally seen the type of passers we had in the run and shoot where they were a little more mobile. They can use their feet a lot. Braden's more of just a genuine pocket passer, which is fine because we clearly have the receiving core for him to do that. So I think now my brain is getting over that hump that I'm not going to see like a Cole McDonald or a Chevin like start running all over the place to create these plays. However, he does need to learn to get rid of, not get those sacks for the loss of yardage. Be sure to get rid of the ball a bit quicker when he can, because when you look at that, the 6 sacks for 41 yards, and Stanford had 8 total tackles with tackles for loss for 49 yards. So 41 yards loss for the sacks. So that's something that, that's a significant amount. So just knowing when to get rid of the ball and not taking those sacks if you don't need to will be kind of just a little bit of a tweak. But again, we can't expect Braden to kind of be the mobile type of creating the plays with your legs. And that's fine because, once again, he seems to be, he's throwing those shaker bombs. He's clearly accurate. He has the receivers to do it. Just, I think it's more of just a decision making at this point now. Clearly the offensive line gives him enough time to throw the ball and just throw it away when it's just not there.
Yeah, I think he continues to improve. I really like what I've seen through 2 games from Braden, especially because I do think he improved from week 0 to week 1 between those 2 games. Just in terms of decision making, he didn't force things as much. I liked that as well. Saw some people saying he was throwing into coverage a bit. Yeah, guess what? That's what you do against defense. They cover your receivers, and Stanford had some really, really good coverage on Friday night. You did mention the 6 sacks, and I agree. A lot of those I mentioned in our first segment, I felt were coverage sacks where Braden had a lot of time back there and just didn't have anywhere to go with the ball. Like you said, in those situations, you just got to throw the ball away, and that's something we saw him do as the game progressed. Braden actually agreed with your assessment as well. He said in post-game that he needs to be better. This is a guy who twice has started the year off with career highs in passing yards, tying career highs in touchdowns, didn't turn the ball over once this past weekend, and he understands that that's not good enough still, that there is still far more that he can and needs to do to help this Hawaii team become a winner. And you can see the frustration on his face, on Coach Timmy Chang's face, Logan Taylor's face, all of these post-game availabilities up on our YouTube channel. But you can hear the frustration from them because they know they have the pieces. They know they have the potential. That's something else Braden talks about, is how, the potential is there, but it's just potential right now, and how frustrating that is.
Yeah, and kudos to Braden Shager. Like, you just kind of touched on it, and I just want to elaborate on what he said during that post-game interview, is that he was asked about Tylan Hines and how Tylan Hines just hasn't gotten going within the first couple of games. And, Braden, as a great leader and a great quarterback does, he put it all on himself. He didn't say anything about Tylan. He did say that Tylan is, of course, a great player, and he's going to get it. Like, it's going to happen, but Braden completely just was like, it's on me, didn't say anything about his line or anything. So and I believe that too. I think it's going to happen. Tylan clearly is a great athlete. Even Landon Sims. Landon was a little banged up, and by all accounts, we could potentially see the return of Najee Bryant Lele. So that could add, Solo won't have to suit up in that running back position, but a big back, but a true running back in Najee, where he will be able to make those plays and be able to hopefully bust through a line that might be a little bigger for those instances that you need a genuine big back. So hearing that he has been cleared medically, so it'll be good to, and hopefully stay that way, see him throughout the season. Another good news for everybody is that Cam Stone, at least this is via his Twitter, this is no official medical clearance from the university, but according to Cam Stone's Twitter, who went down when it's like the worst time too on a kickoff return, and it was like a bad anyways, but Cam Stone, he apparently has just a hyperextended knee, so nothing worse than that, that you just kind of rest and it heals naturally. Nothing you need to be done for the season, or at least in terms, I don't know how long it takes a knee, but I did help hyperextend my elbow before playing basketball in high school, and that hurts. That, I think I was out, and that's an elbow, and elbow is a lot smaller than your knee. So if it is hyperextended, I mean, that is some true pain, but it's not something that you'll have to worry about him being done for the season. Again, that's not medically official from the university, but that is just via Cam Stone himself on the Twitter.
Yeah, it was a nightmare, really, to see who went down when they went down. It was the player from Stanford was ejected for targeting, so 3 ejections on the night in the game. So obviously a hard-hitting matchup between the Cardinal and the Bows. But like you said, Cam did come out the next day on Twitter and tweet out a little, GIF. I
always call it a GIF because the G stands for graphic.
I go back and forth between the two. I confuse myself because I overthink. But he came out, with a thumbs up, and says, I'm all good. And that was good to see. Like you said, a hyperextended knee. It's something that Travis Kelce actually is now dealing with for the Chiefs. He might miss week 1. Their Thursday night matchup against the Lions. So we'll see how long Cam takes to recover from that, should he play this weekend versus Albany, or should he sit out a week or a little bit longer. I would err on the side of caution, only because I really do believe in the depth of this Hawaii defensive back room. Elijah Palmer is someone we haven't even talked about yet, and the true freshman had himself a phenomenal first start for the Bows. He was second on the team. He had 7 tackles. It was a real nice performance for him. Like to see him some more. JoJo Forrest had himself a nice game, so on and so forth. So I would err on the side of caution with Cam, just to get him 100% before Mountain West play.
And we need to step aside, but when we come back, we will still continue our recap of the University of Hawaii football game versus Stanford, as Hawaii fell 37-24. But we'll be back on Wake Up in the Den.
Back to more Wake Up in the Den with Ku'ulei Agbayani on the Hawaii Sports Radio Network, 95.1 FM and AM 760.
Welcome back to all of you, the beautifulest of all the beautiful people. Let's Wake Up in the Den. Ku'ulei Agbayani, Paul Brecht. happy Aloha Tuesday, even though it feels like a Monday. And just to remind you guys, we have switched our YouTube Fridays to YouTube Mondays now because I realized, like, you know what, it's a lot, like, there's just a lot to say and to recap for University of Hawaii football, and then eventually, and then college football, and then eventually NFL football. There's just going to be a lot of stuff going on, so we switched our YouTube shows to Monday, so we're recording right now. Say hello to the camera, Paul, back there. Hello. So you can check it out on our YouTube channel, and as we mentioned on the previous segment, you can also watch the post-game press conferences post-game press conference with UH football head coach Timmy Chang and also quarterback Braden Shager and linebacker Logan Taylor following their game against Stanford. And actually in this the studio, I added like this new camera. Bossman said like I should put it closer to my face. I haven't switched too much with this one, but I added like this camera.
Ooh.
That I'll switch maybe every once in a while, but I don't know. I still got to get used to it for like being like this close. I kind of like the wide shot, but
we got a bunch of cameras for that reason, though, right? It's a bunch of cameras so we can give a bunch of different looks to the beautiful people inside our studio, inside the den here every single morning.
And actually, our beautiful studio, we got like almost half of the studio done with our newly design like blackout theme around the stadium, so it looks amazing. Shout out to Boss Man and Boss Lady. They came in over the weekend to kind of try to finish up the rest of the stuff. Oh yeah, that's what it is. So they came over, and I think you can kind of see it if you guys watched our other YouTubes, but you probably noticed it in our, I think I had it the last video as well, but
at least part behind you was
behind
done.
me is like the black, and then pretty soon you'll see behind Paul as well, and then we'll start to really put up a lot more of our memorabilia. And actually, Paul, I didn't get to put it up. I wanted it to be a surprise, but I didn't get to put it up. I didn't come in early enough. I do have a Jets flag, and not a flag. I do have a Jets pennant. Sorry. So we're going to put a pennant up for you, as we have quite a few pennants up around the studio. But I was like, you know what? It's football season. I got my Bear stuff. I got to give, Paul at least a little bit of something in here.
One thing helps. I appreciate that. Plus, we're going to add in, I think, a mini hoop, right? The Clippers mini hoop.
Yeah,
I think I saw somewhere.
It's down there. I kind of
Yep. Hey, we're gonna have a lot more fun in the den going forward, and that's crazy to say because we already have tons of fun in here as it is.
It's just gonna be really cool to be in here. And you know what? Like you'll see all of it recorded on our podcast. Just a reminder, you can check out the Hawaii Players Pod with Tylen Hines. That's available, presented by Hawaii Pacific Health on our YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcast. So it's going to be, there's a lot of stuff coming up. But all right, getting back to football, a couple more things as we were talking about some of the defensive struggles that Hawaii seems to have in terms of just the penalties and just really needing to clean up the game just a little bit. So we mentioned the sacks, how Stanford had the 6 sacks, so their defense was clearly in it, but Hawaii didn't tally any. So something we need to see a little more productivity. But I think the thing that really hurt them, mentioned this earlier, were those 2 targeting calls. Because if you guys aren't familiar, once you get a targeting call, the player is done for the game. And then if they get a targeting call in the second half, then they have to miss the first half of the next game. So that's where kind of I brought up earlier. So Mekipe was penalized early too. Someone that's really important on our defense. At the 5:59 mark left in the second quarter, Isaiah Tufanga was flagged with 3:04 left in the third quarter. However, he is on the depth chart. So that's why I'm like, all right, well.
Can you potentially...
You can like petition and get it.
That's what I was curious about, because Timmy in the post game did mention that one specifically, the second ejection specifically being, I think, and I don't want to get this wrong, quote, kind of a hard call, and that was fair, I thought, because I was surprised when the flag came out. I was also surprised when the flag came out on the first one, but if they went and reviewed it, fine, I guess, whatever. But you're right, 2 really big defenders, important pieces of the Hawaii defense from the backbone of it, the middle of your defense, 2 guys who very typically are towards the top of your leaderboard in terms of tackles, done for the game. Like you said, Meki early in the game, and then Isaiah Tufanga, still not exactly when the game was over and out of reach quite yet. They were still fighting back, trying to come back, and end up losing one of their best players on defense. We talked about him a lot after their his week 0 performance against Vanderbilt. So two big losses, and it just part of a lot of penalties that came out against the Bows, some of which were just boneheaded plays realistically, and I think you'd hear a lot of them.
One roughing the passer call that could have been prevented.
I think you'd hear a lot of the players kind of echo that sentiment where they were self-inflicted errors and wounds and whatever you want to say. But also I agree with Timmy. There were a few calls where I didn't think it went the way of the Bows, whether that be a non-pass interference, or a couple of those targeting calls. It just, some of the calls did not fall your way. And when you're already getting penalized so much, it's hard to come back from.
Yeah. And because, our Kyle Caldera is a ref, so we tend to have a soft side for referees. And because Paul and I always, I still encourage everyone, never, just
it is a hard job.
Be kind to the refs. People make mistakes, but there are some times where you do, including people like us. We're like, this seems a little sus. They were Pac-12 refs, so that's kind of an interesting thing to point out. But I also mainly want to point out that head ref Matthew Richards, in 2019, he was actually suspended for a bad call. I believe it was in the Washington State and Cal game. It had to deal with just basically calling it for the other team, but then they reviewed and it was like, oh, wait, that should have been called on the other team. So it gave, I think it was on a return for a kick, so the ball had to be placed back when they should have actually gained yardage on top of where they ran the ball to. So it was just horrible, but he got suspended for that. In 2015, Rich Troyer, who was also on the referee staff for the Stanford game, he had gotten suspended for a Pac-12 game in 2015. And then as it works, the rest of the crew, the officiating crew, gets essentially demoted in their position. So I just want to point that out. So in case we were both, Paul and I were feeling that was a little much, in terms of that second targeting call, we heard Timmy say, and then you mentioned Paul earlier off air before we jumped on about how they weren't called for a PI, but then we were called for a PI that looked kind of like the similar type of play. Yeah. So I just wanted to kind of make note of that for you beautiful people, because I thought that was interesting. And, and usually I do not so when we get the extended post game stats and notes, it lists everything. And one of the things that it lists are the referees. And I don't know I never really ever do this, but something did make me Google, I'm just curious about this ref. So I Googled the head ref. First thing that pops up is Matthew Richards suspended for a call in the Washington State Cal game. And I'm like, interesting.
It's funny that you mentioned that the thing that he screwed up or they screwed up was calling something for the wrong team, because there was a call, I don't remember when it was during the game, where they didn't give the penalty yards to the wrong team, but he did say it was a penalty against the defense when it was against the offense. And I remember joking to myself and somebody else who was atop the press box with me. I remember joking, he was just so used to calling things on Hawaii that he had a Freudian slip. And so it is funny to hear that some previous errors in his refereeing career also had to do with screwing up the sides of penalties and yardage.
So yes, it was a missed call. Now that I brought it up again, in Cal's 33-20 win against Washington State. So early in the third quarter, Washington State returned a kickoff to the 50-yard line, but a hands to the face penalty was called against the Cougars, and they were forced to take over at their own 8-yard line. The penalty was actually committed by a Cal player and should have tacked on the 15 yards to the end of Washington State's return. So I'm just
How do you
putting it
screw
up.
things up that bad?
I don't know. And then Rich Troyer, who is listed as he was the linesman for the Stanford game, and this was again back in 2015. He was the line judge in that game as well. Rich Troyer for one game and downgraded the entire staff for giving Washington. They just like Washington State. or actually don't
They
like.
hate Washington
Yeah, never mind.
State.
Well, this one they liked Washington State because they gave Washington State an extra down in its game against Arizona State.
Oh my God.
So I told you guys, it's kind of ironic. Like I promise, like anytime refs have bad games, and you guys know me, especially when it comes to basketball too, I get a little nuts. But I never ever like Google referees, and for some reason I was inclined to Google these refs, and this is what I discovered. So I'm like, the football gods just were like, Kool-Aid, you should probably just Google it and just see what happens. And like, sure enough, this is what I discovered, and there you go. So I wanted to share that with you beautiful people. All right, to wrap up the show, want to kind of just talk about the overall fan experience. As we know, they really upgraded everything, the concessions, the seating. So yeah, just want to share about things that I've heard around from the community and also on social media. So we'll close out the show with that on Wake Up in the Den.
Wake Up in the Den with Ku'ulei Agbayani on the Hawai'i Sports Radio Network, 95.1 FM and AM 760.
Welcome back to Wake Up in the Den. Ku'ulei Agbayani and Paul Brecht. All right, talked a lot about University of Hawaii football and their game against Stanford, dropping it 37-24. So didn't cover the two, however, covered the over. So we got one
Hawaii
for two.
And the over,
Hawaii
baby.
and the over. We're just going to, and I actually do. It's cute though, because I am keeping a tally. However, it does have a note from Jody. So shout out to the First Lady that because they were in here, like I said, working on the studio. So I got a little note on my Hawaii ATS tally that I'm keeping.
I love it.
Where I didn't get a chance to put the second game. But yeah, I have to put this past game. So obviously a hit on both Hawaii and the over for their game against Vanderbilt. But for Stanford, but you know, we're still ahead. We're still ahead.
I think I have to get a Hawaii in the over shirt now. I think I made that promise last week.
You did. Well, if they won, so.
Okay. I don't know. I don't remember putting that qualifier in there, but I'm glad that I did because I got to see it one more time, I guess.
Yeah.
To get that shirt.
Speaking of shirts, though, give a shout out. Well, Paul over here, he's wearing his University of Hawaii Rainbow Warriors shirt, and then I am also donning the Lions Den shirt and the defense. Shout out defense. They're gonna figure it out. You know, they're gonna clean up that mistakes. So
they're also gonna start producing turnovers. Like that's something big as well. We had we asked a few questions about that in the post game to both Logan Taylor and Coach Chang, where the defense has struggled to produce turnovers in games so far, which is weird because during practice they actually do a really good job getting turnovers. They do this thing where they scream out the count of how many interceptions, fumbles, turnovers they force throughout practice, and the amount of times they've got 5, 6, 7, 8. I think 8 is the highest I remember it going one time. Like, this is a defense that can produce turnovers, can play disciplined football. That's a big reason why it's been frustrating early on, but it's also a big reason why, like you said, you and I, we really do believe they're going to get it together going forward. And they've played a couple of teams who they got some good players on those offenses and some good coaches as well. So they'll figure it out. They're going to get it together, and the Bows are going to be real good real soon.
Yeah. It's only a matter of time, people. But anyways, want to talk a little bit about just the fan experience, the increase at the stadium. I mean, it looked awesome. That intro was like chicken skin worthy. We have it on our social media and on our YouTube at Hawaii Sports Radio. And there was a good crowd. Shout out to everyone for wearing their white. It was a true whiteout. The uniforms looked nice with their all white. And it was feel good vibes from the beginning. Seemed like all accounts, everyone had fun at the party at the last, or whatever. What do they call it? Kickoff at the last.
I was going to say, you keep saying party at the last.
Is.
It'll change to party at the last in no time.
Well, because party at the last, it's a UH baseball thing, and I think it was started by Scotty Scott. And they were starting to say party at the last for like their baseball game because they're just like Scotty Scott and co were just so fun to watch when it comes to baseball. So they were the ones that were saying party at the last, and it just naturally stuck as party at the last. So now it's like, even though you do, and I think of it as a party, right? Because it's like that's what they're trying. That's the atmosphere they're trying to create, is kind of like, because there's no tailgating allowed, they want people to, hey, that you still can come early. You can still have your adult beverages too. And the kids can run around on the field and
hang out,
create that
socialize.
atmosphere. Yeah. So that's what they wanted to create. But it still, by all accounts, looked really, really good. There were some, there's still some kinks to work through, as
Obviously.
to be expected. And, there are a lot of people, more people than we have ever expected. There were more concession stands. However, it seems like there was still long lines in terms of what I'm seeing. And I want to bring up kind of Warrior All Access put together this thread where it said, despite what happened on the field Friday, if you attended, tell us your experience. So again, this is via Warrior All Access on Twitter at Warrior Access. So some of the things that were said were the beer lines were long, but since it was a bigger crowd than last year, then maybe that's why. You should still figure out a way to kind of go through the crowd, just because you want to be able to get the people what they want and be able to go back into their seats to be able to cheer on the team. Someone else said, was a really awesome college atmosphere. Loved it. Only a couple of things. The beer and food lines were really long. The speakers coming from only one part of the stadium, and it was soft, and they kept playing slow jams. Needs a speaker in front of students. Get the dancing. Did you? I didn't notice if it was. I couldn't notice the music. So we were like in the suites, and this is my one knock against the suites. It's cool. I'm fortunate to be invited and hang out there for games. However, there is no opening, so you don't really get the crowd feel. Like when you go to other stadiums, there's kind of like an open concept suite, so you can kind of hear the crowd and feel the vibe. But at the suites at Ching, it's all enclosed. You can kind of open the top, windows they open out, but it's still not the same. So I couldn't even really tell what the music was. I was on the field for the first portion of the game and the walkout and everything, but for most of the game I was up there. And so I didn't really notice, but when I saw that comment, I had a chuckle. Did you notice if it was slow jams, Paul?
I didn't notice like a ton of slow jams, but I also will say I don't remember a ton of music outside of the band anyway. But I will say I don't normally focus on the music outside of the band anyway. It's one of the bigger draws for me because I really appreciate the Hawai'i pep band, marching band, all of the bands that they have, I think are really, really fun and really, really awesome. They might have played slow jams though. My attention was fractured that night all over the place, So I don't remember the slow jams as much, but I do understand if somebody if they want to dance, people want to dance. Yeah. Like we said, a party at the Les, they want to make it a party at TC Ching. They want to make it a party everywhere for us Bows fans as we continue to take in all these UH athletics going forward,
Especially with that student section. I mean, shout out to the students. They filled up that end zone, and it was great to see. And
the Bozos, Manoa Maniacs, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah. They were in their white. They were there. And then but then you look at speaking of the band, you look at the band, and they were kind of like squeezed into that one long section. I'm like, oh, because I think about the humongous section they had at Aloha Stadium, and then I think the last couple of years they were on the turf, and they were kind of spread out on the turf and didn't really have a section in the stands. But this time, since it's extended, they were able to fit in the stands, but it was just like a sliver that took up just like one section of one of the end zones next to the student section. So I was like, that's the first thing I thought of, was like, wow, that's where the band is fitting. But hey, kudos. They made it work. The students were out there.
They rock. They really do rock. Shout out to them.
But if someone noticed that maybe we need a little more jamming music, then maybe we do. Because, again, we want to keep the students coming. We need to keep them entertained so that they want to continue to fill up that entire section.
That's a big thing Eric does want, too. Eric Matthews, the director of marketing and all of that. He wants the feedback. He wants to see what you guys think because it, like you said, is a work in progress, something that they're continually trying to make better as the season goes on, as events go on, and it's not going to be perfect the first time around, but hopefully by the end of the season, it's going to be pretty darn close to perfect. It was pretty fun the first time, at least that's what the early returns have come back and seem to say.
Yeah, and I want to find the link for you guys. They did send out another survey. Like Eric said, they read those surveys. They don't send it out just to send it out. So if you guys have one of those links or you get it, make sure you have a question or concern, be sure you fill it out because they see it. I already got indication that they've read through a good portion of what they received for this first game, and if they can, they'll try to make changes and improvements coming into the next game versus Albany. They genuinely care, you guys, as for your fan experience. So be sure you fill out those surveys. A lot of people still saying though the food choices, even though the lines were long, it was like good food. So that's always a plus, as Hawaii people, we love our food, but it seems collectively for the most part it was a positive experience for majority of the fans that went there. Again, fill out the surveys if you guys have a problem. Well, but we got to go. For Paul Brecht, I'm Kule Agbayani. Mahalo for listening. It's been Wake Up in the Den. Bye.